12-sided die, commonly called the D12, is technically a dodecahedron, which is just an amazing word. It originates from the Greek dodecahedron, meaning 12 faces, or 12-faced. Dodecahedron. Do like dos in Spanish for 2. Deca like decade for 10. Hedron being a geometrical figure with a certain number of faces or surfaces. In the case of the D12, each face is a pentagon, a 5-sided shape like what you would commonly see in a simple drawing of a house and the black surfaces on a soccer ball, aka a football in the international sense. The D12 actually has a long history to it. Bronze and copper dodecahedrons have been found in archaeological sites dating as far back as ancient Egypt. Here are Roman dodecahedra from the 2nd and 4th centuries AD. It's not known exactly what their purposes were here. Clearly, they were not used for role-playing games. In fact, they typically don't show any signs of having been rolled or used in physical activities. They bear no numbers, no letters, no other information on them. Though the purpose of these Roman dodecahedra is uncertain, there are various theories among scholars as to what they were used for, including surveying instruments, knitting implements, toys, decorations or art objects, monetary value, as some of them have been found within hoards of coins, religious artifacts, divination devices, or maybe even weapons, though many scholars consider this unlikely due to their light weight. Another possible explanation is that this kind of dodecahedron was a metal smithing test. A smith would need to forge this complex object and make it well in order to prove his skill. The D12 is commonly featured in tabletop RPGs. Of all the standard polyhedral dice found in RPGs, the D12 is the least used. Now, some might argue that the D3 is used even less, but the D3 is the same cube shape as the D6, so the D12 is indeed the least featured polyhedral in RPGs. On the band Weezer's debut album, their song In the Garage begins with these lines: "I've got the Dungeon Master's Guide. I've got a 12-sided die." The whole song makes references to the underdogs and the less popular, and it captures that nerd rock spirit of the D12. In the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, the D12 is only found in a few places. The D12 is the hit die for only one single class, the Barbarian. The Bard class feature, Bardic Inspiration, as well as Song of Rest, eventually do become D12s, but only at very high levels. The Wizard class feature, Overchannel, uses D12s for the amount of damage the overchanneling wizard does to himself. The Great Axe and the Lance are the only 2 weapons that have D12 damage dice. The spells Poison Spray and Witch Bolt are the only 2 in the book that use D12s for their damage dice. Well, technically, if you cast Animate Objects and you animate a huge size object, it uses D12s for its damage. In the Monster Manual, huge-sized creatures have D12 hit dice, and certain monsters do use D12 for damage or other effects, so you see this die come up a little bit more in that book. In the Dungeon Master's Guide, certain random roll tables use the D12 when generating results, and a couple items use D12 for their damage. And that's about it for the D12 in D&D. The D4, the D6, the D8, the D10, and the D20 get used way more. Here's another curious thing. On a standard D12, the numbers are arranged so that the opposite sides always add up to 13. This arrangement is carefully designed to ensure fairness in random rolls, but it can lead some to consider the D12 to be the most unlucky of the polyhedral dice. But what's to fear of the number 13 anyway? The belief that the number 13 is unlucky is known as triskaidekaphobia. Many cultures throughout history have associated the number 12 with completeness and order. 12 months in a year, 12 zodiac signs, 12 hours on a clock, the 12 days of Christmas. Because 13 follows 12, it can be seen as irregular and therefore associated with disorder or bad luck. The Last Supper had 13 attendees, Jesus and his 12 apostles, one of whom was Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him, leading to his crucifixion and death on the following day, a Friday. Surely you've heard people worrying whenever the 13th of the month falls on a Friday. There's even a whole slasher horror movie series called Friday the 13th. This superstition of 13 is more far-reaching than you might imagine. For instance, the Code of Hammurabi from ancient Babylon, which is one of the earliest legal codes, omitted the number 13. Additionally, some historical stories, like the belief that there were 13 steps leading to the gallows, have added to this superstition. In Norse mythology, there's a story about a banquet in Valhalla attended by 12 gods. Then the trickster Loki crashes the party uninvited, making him the 13th guest, which leads to chaos and strife. The next time that you're in a tall building, check to see if it has a 13th floor. Most buildings don't have one. Well, technically they do, it's just that the number 13 is skipped on the labeling so that things jump from the 12th to the 14th floors. The same is true for most large cruise ships. There is no deck 13. Despite these psychological and cultural aversions to the number 13, there are some who hold the opposite view. In Italy, for example, the number 13 is generally considered lucky. It's often associated with good fortune and is especially auspicious in the context of gambling. In Chinese culture, the number 13 is considered lucky because it sounds similar to the word for definitely or assuredly in both Mandarin and Cantonese. In Judaism, the number 13 is associated with the coming of age for Jewish boys through the bar mitzvah ceremony. This transition from childhood to adulthood is seen as a positive and important milestone. Certain indigenous cultures have positive associations with the number 13. For example, certain Native American tribes consider 13 to be a sacred and even lucky number, often representing the lunar calendar's 13 full moons in a year. In some numerology systems, the number 13 is actually seen as powerful and mystical. You can add together the 1 plus the 3 to equal 4. It's a number associated with transformation and spiritual growth. The D12 is part of what are known as the Platonic solids. It's a group of 5 regular polyhedra. The angles between the faces and the edges are all the same. Along with the dodecahedron are its 4 siblings. The tetrahedron, or D4, composed of 4 equal triangles. The hexahedron, aka cube, or D6, composed of 6 equal squares. The octahedron, or D8, composed of 8 equal triangles. And the icosahedron, or D20, composed of 20 equal triangles. The Platonic solids have several remarkable properties. All faces are regular polygons of the exact same shape and size. The same number of faces meet at each vertex. All edges have the exact same length. They are some of the most symmetrical objects that exist. These geometrical shapes have fascinated mathematicians, philosophers, and artists for centuries due to their aesthetic and mathematical significance. They are named after the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who discussed them in his philosophical dialogues as idealized representations of the elements. The tetrahedron D4 for fire, the hexahedron D6 for earth. Also, the D3 again has that same cube shape. The octahedron D8 for air. The dodecahedron D12 for the cosmos, referring to the ordered and harmonious arrangement of the universe. And the icosahedron D20 for water. In ancient Greek philosophy, there were 4 classical elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Plato introduced the idea of the 5th element called ether, which was a divine and unchanging substance that made up the heavens and the celestial realm. It is the 5th element, and the dodecahedron D12 is composed of 5-sided pentagons. Wait, but what about the D10? Well, that is actually the odd one out. It is a polyhedral die, but it is not a platonic solid. See how it's composed of a top half and a bottom half, and the 2 halves are offset from each other, and its edges can have 2 different lengths, and this middle edge is curved or waving. What would the D10's element be? I have to wonder. Oh, D12, you are cosmos embodied. You are order out of chaos, harmony in its precise balance, one step away from the disaster of ill luck. How often you are neglected, yet when you enter the arena, all take heed. When the mightiest axe strikes, your impact is greater than any others. Oh, how the forgotten shall become the remembered, and the last shall be first. Thank you for watching, my dice rolling brethren. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. I also want to give a special thanks to these patrons who are major supporters of the channel. You guys are huge motivators for me. In particular, Adam Wood, Vince Villelli, Nick thy Pirate King, Locke Monroe, and Nicholas A. Until next time, may your great axes keep cleaving, and may your adventures be many.